Hello everyone, welcome to my video presentation of my chosen fermented product, sourdough bread. For my product variable, I'll be doing two different starter cultures, one made with wholemeal flour and one made with rye flour. With the wholemeal flour, it's a high gluten and high content of bran and germ, which is nutrient for the ferment. And the rye flour is low gluten, high content of bran and germ, higher content of amylase, which can result in a quicker ferment, and higher content of pentazans, which is a sugar that can stimulate the growth of lactic acid bacteria and result in a more sour loaf. For the types of fermentation, we have alcoholic fermentation with yeast converting simple sugars into ethanol and CO2. We have lactic fermentation with homofermentative reactions with simple sugars being converted into lactic acid, and heterofermentative reactions with simple sugars being converted into lactic acid, acetic acid, and CO2. Common microorganisms at play: yeast strains, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, Candida. Some common LAB strains: homofermentative Lactobacillus acidiophilus, heterofermentative Lactobacillus sanfrancisiensis. Before fermentation can begin, we have complex carbohydrates being broken down into fermentable sugars by enzymes. Starch, a complex carbohydrate and polysaccharide, is broken down by the amylase enzyme via hydrolysis or when we add water. This is cleaved into maltose, a simple sugar and disaccharide consisting of two glucose molecules, which is then cleaved by the maltase enzyme into glucose, a simple sugar and monosaccharide. Now that our complex carbohydrates have been broken down into fermentable sugars, the EMP glycolytic pathway can begin, with glucose being converted into energy for the lactic acid bacteria and yeast convert into CO2, ethanol, and lactic acid. Okay, onto the video now. Day one, preparing our starter cultures. We've got the rye flour, we've got the wholemeal flour, both organic, just so no synthetic sprays have inhibited any microbes or wild yeast that we want. Mixing that in a 1-to-1 ratio, 30 grams flour, 30 grams water. Just got some boiled water there. It's cooled down to about 30 degrees. Okay, now enjoy some copyright-free, cheesy music in the background. So day 5, we're discarding some of our starter culture. This is to strengthen the yeast population and control acidity levels. And we're just refreshing with some flour and water once again. And I'll be doing this every day until I need my starter culture for bake day. Day 9, preparing our leaven. So this involves taking a portion of our sourdough discard, mixing it with flour and water in the amounts that we need for our loaf in a 1-to-2-to-2 ratio. Okay, day 10, we're actually making dough today. So bringing flour and water together for the autolyse part of the process. And this is so the gluten can form. We let this rest for about 2 hours before adding the starter and the salt. Okay, time for the bulk fermentation. So we're adding our rye starter culture, about 90 grams, which was about 20% of the flour total, and around 10 grams of salt, which I think was about 2%. And we're bringing that together, mixing that through the dough, and then eventually working it and stretching it, and creating tension in the dough. And we'll do another 3 stretch and folds after this. Okay, now doing the bulk fermentation for the wholemeal. I kept both batches completely separate and all other variables the same, only changing the actual starter culture itself. So at our first stretch and fold, we'll be doing 3 sets of these with 30 minutes rest in between. And this is all about building tension in the loaf. Okay, yikes, I accidentally left the stove on trying to raise the ambient temperature and cooked one of my batches. I had to do everything again the next day. Okay, here we are, dough shaping after another 8 hours of baking because of that accident. Here we are, shaping the dough. Okay, a quick proof check. So these have been fermenting for around 8 hours now. It's about 9 PM and I started around 10 AM. So I just checked the temperature, they're both sitting at 27 degrees. These are about to go in the fridge and I'll bake with them tomorrow morning. Okay, bake day. So starting with the rye loaf here, we'll score it so the pressure releases from the top. Preheated the oven with a Dutch oven inside at 230 degrees. Cook it with the lid on for the oven spring, cook it with the lid off for crust development. Let's go. Okay, so bread's out of the oven. Spent about 20 minutes with the lid on to get the oven spring. Around 15 minutes with the lid off to get crust development. Checked it with a thermometer, it was about 97 degrees, which tells me that it's cooked. And that's the rye loaf done. Okay, onto the wholemeal now. So the fermentation was a bit more active and successful with this loaf. And that was due to, I think, the leaven being more active, visually anyway. And in my opinion, it was a better loaf. And there are my two beautiful loaves. So wholemeal on the right, rye on the left there. So fermentation wise, the wholemeal was better. That's just because the leaven was more active, I think. And the taste wise, yeah, pretty much the same. In terms of upscaling, it come from the perspective of starting a business from my rental. For that, I'd need rental approval, a food license, and hopefully an upgrade to a market stall around $10,000 to $20,000. In terms of delivery costs, around $5,000 to $10,000 in fuel if I was to do it myself. And appliances, I would need an upgrade. A food warmer for cultures and doughs in the winter, around $200 to $5,000 depending on size. An oven upgrade, a steam injected oven running about $5,000 to $10,000 all the way up to $60,000. Okay, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Bye.